Happy Saturday, everyone. My name is Correa. I'm also known as Courageous, and we have a very special episode of Women Atheists UNLOAD discussing gender roles and whether we think that they are necessary. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As our guests, we have student Dr. Ben and Heathen Queen joining us, so buckle in.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that.
Hey.
Heyo.
Hi, everybody.
Say hello, Ben.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a lot to cover, and so we're just going to dive in because there's been a lot in social media. I feel like obviously this is a discussion that has been happening since the dawn of time with human relations, but it has been especially prevalent the more that gender critical activists are attacking people for not being their typical gender roles and showing how this actually harms everyone, not just trans people. It harms everybody.
Yeah. I mean, as you guys were saying kind of before the show, it's just misogyny. That's all it is, right? Because we're trying to force, not me, but like them, or they're trying to force people into these like predetermined roles that they've decided like this is feminine, this is masculine, and like whatever genitalia you were born with is like attached to one of those things because we say so. So, yeah.
Yeah, the sociology of gender is quite fascinating, and I'm not a sociologist, so everything that I'm saying is simplified down to a layperson's perspective. I do at one point want to get a sociologist to talk about kind of the nuances of the sociology of gender. But it's so interesting how basically gender is just society's way of dealing with reproductive differences in humans. And it's like, how do human brains categorize people with different body parts? And what does that mean for their social hierarchy? So it's like all these categories are pretty meaningless apart from people's interactions with each other. And so people tend to think that gender is this like concrete objective thing, but the field of sociology they even tend to steer away from saying that you have a gender or you are a gender, and it's more you do a gender, because gender changes throughout society. Like there's no concrete definition of what makes someone a man or what makes somebody a woman in society. It's all fluid over time. So you perform a gender according to your culture and your society of how you want to interact with other people. And there's like a whole conversation to be had as well about gender abolitionism, which is a whole kind of separate conversation. We could talk for days about that. But since we live in a society that already has gender as a concept and has this social hierarchy, even people who may not want to be included, even people who are gender abolitionists, have to work still within this framework that has already been established. So when people who don't fit the stereotype gender roles need to interact with a society that has them established, what does that mean? And that's where we get into things like genderqueer, gender fluidity, non-binary identities, like for people who need to find a way to integrate themselves in a society that has set up gender in a way that they don't relate with. it's super interesting of a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, oh, no, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, it's just, I mean, it's something for me that, you know, as someone who is non-binary, that I really wrestle with, because I'm not someone who, like, I just know how I feel and how I feel in regards to, like, being a woman, like, growing up and having all of these, like, pressures about, like, you know, like, society of, like, this is what a woman should be. I was just like, well, I guess I'm a woman because I was born with, you know, I was born female. I'm just bad at it. You know, it was like kind of the impression. I was like, well, this is what like society says that that I should be, and I'm not. And then I started like learning things about like my body. Like, you know, I have found out that my estrogen levels are significantly lower than the typical person who's born female, significantly. And that impacts a lot of things for me. So even though like right now I'm wearing a dress and it's got flowers on it, and I wear dresses most of the time, and it's because they are comfortable. Wearing like a dress with leggings, but it's you know, like even like being non-binary, it's like almost like there's like this pressure. Like, I don't know if you've seen the meme where it's like the dean from Community, where someone's like, well, you don't look non-binary, and it's like him half man half woman being like, well, let me put on my non-binary uniform. Like, it's just like we have all those pressures, but it's like all bullshit.
Yeah, well, and I mean, like, this is a really sort of, I don't want to say silly, but it's not like a very profound point. But like these things that if you asked someone today, hey, if you had to dress a man in an outfit that you find masculine, right? We have like a general idea of what they're going to do, right? They're going to put pants on him, probably jeans or slacks, probably, I would imagine jeans, and then some kind of like maybe a button-up shirt or a t-shirt or whatever, right? Like we have this idea of that's sort of what men wear. Obviously, there's lots of things outside of that, but that idea. So, and if you said dress this person in a way that you find feminine, then yeah, you'll put on probably a dress or a skirt or something with flowers, yada, yada, yada. But if you go back a couple hundred, I mean, not even a couple hundred, go back 100 years, go back 50 years, then go back a couple hundred years from there. And like the idea of what's masculine or feminine clothing is often switched, like from what we think today, or just like vastly different, right? So like, how can we say that there are like correct sort of gender roles when like throughout history, they've kind of flip-flopped and sort of been different, and like it's weird. It's useless.
It is really weird, and it just also shows that like there isn't one set, you know, when people try to be like, well, this is what, you know, like this is what it means to be a man and this is what it means to be a woman, that if you're trying to say that there's one like scientific definition, then like how do you explain the fact that high heels started out with men being like wearing high heels and men wearing makeup and wearing lipstick and, you know, like wearing clothing like dresses that like clearly at some point society decided, oh wait, there's not just sex, there's also gender, and those things are fluid and they can change.
Yeah. Well, and it's like what's inherently like it's fabric, right? Okay, take up any piece of clothing, deconstruct it, right? Take all the seams out, you just have fabric. What makes that piece of fabric masculine or feminine? Like there's no inherent, something I've learned since like deconstructing is that like so many things that we assign a value to or a value judgment or like a morality or something along those lines, like there's actually none. Like it's not there. We put that there as a human because it helps us, quite honestly, divide things and divide people and like sort of try to understand, you know, the world or like whatever. But there's nothing inherently gendered about a piece of fabric. Like,
nope. Or a color or the type of toy. You know, if a boy wants to play with a doll or a girl wants to play with a, you know, a Tonka truck, like fucking why not?
And that,
okay, so I do want to bring up the question of the difference between non-binary and gender fluid. If we could bring that up, because I think it's a really important question. I have I have some thoughts, but Ben, I would really love if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, so non-binary is kind of a broad umbrella for somebody that does not fit the standard male or female boxes. Like they are something outside of those boxes. They might also be both of those boxes. They might be neither of those boxes. And gender fluidity is kind of a subset, I think, of the non-binary umbrella because they don't fit one of those boxes. A lot of people that are gender fluid might say that they fit both of those boxes, but not all of the time. They might fit one box at some times and the other box at other times, or just different aspects of their lives have them in those different boxes. I'm sure it's a lot more nuanced than that. But then within the non-binary category, just that you can be non-binary and not be gender fluid. Like you can be non-binary and not have any gender identity at all. I know people that do not accept a gender identity. I know people who have multiple gender identities, people that identify with one more than another, like trans masculine people might not fit with the man box, but they see themselves more masculine than feminine. They identify more closely with one than another. And it's all very, very variable. So I think gender fluidity is more of a subset of non-binary, but I'm curious about Correa's impression of this.
I mean, our answers are very similar. So in the same way that like there's asexuality, and that's kind of that blanket term, that there's also different categories within it. So like there are some people that are asexual and they are completely sex adverse. Like that's just not for them. Some people, like for me, I'm demisexual. So for me, I am asexual. I do not experience any sexual attraction until I form a strong emotional bond with someone, and then sexual feelings can emerge. And so in the same way, non-binary is this umbrella that covers everyone who does not fit into the binary, just like Ben said. But within that, there is something called gender fluid. And for people who are gender fluid, so for example, one of my best friends, Ren, they are non-binary, but they are specifically cast gender. And what that means is that they do not care what pronoun you use for them. Like they could not care less. Like when you're talking with them, if you pick up they them energy, and those are the pronouns that you use with them, that's what they feel like. They're like, okay, awesome, go with that. If you pick up masculine energy and so you use masculine pronouns, they're completely fine with that. If you are like, oh, they were born female and so that's like what you pick up on, they could care less. For some non-binary people, they're very specific. They care because they don't identify with either of the genders. So they them is a very important thing for them to have the correct pronouns for that particular person. Another example would be Jagazis. If you guys know them, they are non-binary. But the way that theirs is that like they represent masculine, so they are okay with masculine pronouns. But if they could, they would literally spend like half of their day being in the body of a woman and being half of their day being in the body of a man. Like one or the other doesn't feel like 100%. If they were 100% one of them, doesn't feel correct to them, and so they experience gender dysphoria half the time. And then also, but just saying non-binary, being like, well, I don't identify with either of the genders, does not that causes them dysphoria too, because they actually do, like, there are times that they really do feel like they fit within a masculine body, but then there are times that they feel like I'm 100%, like I feel like I have a woman's body. So it's more of a fluid rather than it being set. But yeah. Do you have any other questions or about that? Or
I just want to say that I noticed in the chat that there's who is it? Johnster Monster was talking about how he wears yoga pants at home. And that's great. Me too. I'm wearing them right now. But I was going to say that, like, I saw this week on it's like Christian Twitter has seasons.
Yes.
And we did the David and Bathsheba season, and then we just went straight into yoga pants season. And it's true. It's a clockwork. And somebody literally said that yoga pants were Satan's greatest creation.
How?
I mean, seems like a slam dunk for Satan, honestly, because like they are super comfortable. I love them. And my butt always looks.
To me, also, as someone who is like ethnically Jewish, the fact that it's like the Holocaust, nope, yoga pants, like,
yeah, yep, like
what?
Sin was actually brought into the world by yoga pants. It is a mistranslation of the
Exactly
Bible.
the Hebrew.
Exactly.
It
Yeah.
actually didn't say fruit; it said yoga pants,
Yoga
and y'all
pants.
are just misinterpreting. Okay.
The fruit
I mean,
of
they ate of the fruit, you know.
Yeah.
Sorry. Any event, we can get back to the topic at hand. All I'm saying is that everyone should wear yoga pants because they're very comfortable.
Yes. I love
if you want.
And clothing is an interesting topic for me because, like, the clothes themselves have no gender. When you put society's expectations on it, that's when you can get into some interesting feelings of dysphoria. And my own experience growing up, of course, I was assigned female, and my mom would spend a lot of time trying to get me to wear girly clothes, and I hated it, absolutely hated it. I cried every time I had to go clothes shopping because I was like, I do not like this. And I wore pretty androgynous clothing because I was like, I can get away with this and still be seen as female, but wear like a t-shirt and pants, and no one's gonna think I'm weird for that except for my parents. But I noticed this weird disconnect because there are certain things that, like, aesthetically, I like them as a style. Like, there's certain feminine items of clothing that I think look nice. The difference was, like, I would see something and I'd say, I like the way that looks, but I did not like how they were on me. I was there's a difference between liking that and liking how I feel in it, or liking me being in it. And it would just ruin me because I'm like I couldn't piece together why I was so uncomfortable. It's like, it's not that I don't like things that are feminine. And in fact, like, there's certain things that even now, as I'm understanding my trans identity and like my masculinity and what that means for me, there's certain things that are feminine that, you know, if I could get away with wearing this and not be seen as feminine, I'd be totally down for it. Like, guy liner is hot. I'm just going to say it right now. If I could get away with wearing guy liner and nobody would think of me as a woman, I'd probably do it. Like, nail polish.
I'm going to be honest. I was going to say that. I love nail polish on guys. I'm all about it.
Welcome, Cindy.
Hey, sorry I'm late. So the US changed the daylight time last week, and we didn't. So I was expecting for the show to start in half an hour, and in fact it was an hour earlier. So I'm sorry about that.
Okay, we're just glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here too. I was really looking forward to this episode because it's a very interesting topic, and having been here makes it even better. So yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Good to see you.
Well, yeah, and I'm so glad that you're here, Cindy. One of the things that just to kind of get back to the topic is so this isn't as much clothing, but it has to do with societal beauty standards. Of one of the things that will drive me crazy when I see is, and they usually mean it in a really good way, but like, so I follow on TikTok, I follow CC Jacobson. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she was the very first trans person in her country. And she had to leave her country for her safety. She's a knockout. She literally looks gorgeous. She looks like Marilyn Monroe, like, and that's not an exaggeration. So, but it'll drive me crazy when I'll see in her comment section people being like, it doesn't matter that you're trans, you're so gorgeous. And it should just be that first part. It doesn't matter that you're trans, because your trans identity is not, and the value of you as a human is not tied to whether you meet societal beauty standards. Because let me tell you something. I remember watching, I don't know if any of you watched Glee, but the character of Coach Beast, when I watched the first episode that had that character in it, I was watching it with someone who could not believe that the actress who was playing that was a woman, because that person does not meet societal beauty standards. And I was like, no, mom, that is a woman. Sorry, I didn't mean it. My mom's a very, like, she's a very loving and accepting person, but like at the time we just like had a lot to grow in. But like, that's just an example of like, that's someone who identifies with the gender they were assigned at birth, who in the show they use that as a storyline where the guys found her so unattractive and were making fun of that. And so it's like, you know, people who are trans, they always worry about whether am I passing in this new gender. And that indirectly also really harms people who aren't trans as well, because of those.
I do see that. That's kind of interesting too, because there was a kind of laughable thing that happened on Twitter. Of course, everything dramatic happens on Twitter.
Yeah,
I think I know what you're talking
this one
about.
guy. Well, this one guy, trans guy, who went viral for. He ended up like saying he was basically a political detrans, and he was like, I hate myself for going through this transition because I went bald and I look just like a random dude. And it's like, bro, HRT is not meant to make you hot. The goal is to make you look like an average man. And you look like an average man. Like, no offense to the average man, but like, not everybody is Ryan Reynolds. Like, I'm sorry. Like, transitioning is not going to make you Ryan Reynolds. But I mean, it might. And if it does, cool. But that's not the goal for people who are transitioning. The goal is to try to undo the things that your puberty did to you. And it did that. And this person even admitted later that they had PCOS and higher levels of testosterone anyway, so they were balding before they started HRT. But it's like the standard, the societal beauty standards, like it goes both ways, like for men and for women. But then you do see, and Cindy can probably attest to this, but I was on a show with trans people recently where the conversation about like people are willing to let trans people have the basic rights as long as they're passing and as long as they meet these standards. So like talking about bathrooms, like if you're a trans person trying to use a woman's bathroom and like somebody who is very passing and very stereotypically beautiful, she might say, well, do you think I should have to go use the men's bathroom? And they're like, no, we're not trying to target people like you. We're only trying to target people that don't pass.
Fit in our box.
Like, but you know that you are affecting everybody, and you're affecting cis people and trans people. So I agree that societal.
Well, not only that, but what that does is it causes people who are cisgender and aren't conventionally attractive to suddenly be at risk of, you know, if they go to the bathroom, that they're gonna be accused of things.
Yeah,
it's a little bit like so in 2012 France voted to allow gay couples to marry, and of course there was a lot of debate, there was a lot of heat, and one of the arguments I heard a lot is you know, they were showing pictures of gay parades, and they were showing those people who you know, wear leathers and with bikes and everything like that. And they said, I don't want those people to be able to adopt a child, for example. And well, if you prevent it for them, you prevent it for also the people you consider normal gay people. So and it's the same idea here.
Yeah.
So regarding the question of the topic today, I was thinking about it today, and I was wondering if maybe we could maybe rephrase that question, and instead of asking if they are necessary, ask if maybe they are inevitable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what we had talked to. At least I kind of touched on at the beginning, like how gender abolitionism is a is a whole concept, and that could be a whole other discussion as well. But like, yeah, a lot of gender roles comes down to being how are we interacting with society around us, and how do we engage with this social hierarchy that has been set up. And like, even if we want to abolish gender as a hierarchy, we unfortunately are forced into this, and we can't really abolish it just suddenly. Like it's not
Right.
a thing we really have a lot of control over. So how do we as people like influence society in small ways? How do we get society to work with us for who we are, even when we can't change the entire system? And I think, yeah, that's kind of the bigger conversation.
Yeah. Well, I do think like gender abolition, it's the same and different than like abolition of any kind, right? So if we want to talk about prison abolition or police abolition, like it's intrinsically two-pronged, because you're trying to sort of dismantle a system from the inside, but you're still living within that system, and then B, imagine and build this new thing, right? So like when you talk about, because I talk a lot about like police and police abolition. So when people don't have any other options, they're going to call the police, right? So if we're living in a society in which like we're trying to dismantle the police system, we have to also start building other options so that people have those options and they don't just like default to calling the police because there's nothing else they can do. And like, I am probably the least like important voice in this conversation when it comes to, you know, how do we start dismantling and rebuilding? But I think it's always important to remember for folks that, not you guys don't need to be reminded of this, but folks who are like me, that we have to hold that tension of like, we're doing two things at once. And like, if we don't give people other options, then yeah, they're going to default to what we've have had handed down to us.
Yeah.
So, Ben, I have a question for you. On a scientific level, what triggered those gender roles to appear in our society in the first place?
Yeah. So this goes along with sociology, and I talked a little bit about it before you got here, but it's like, it all comes down to kind of the human brain needing to categorize people, and people notice differences in anatomy and differences in reproductive function. So it was society had to do something with why are these people different? Of course, it's too much of a task for humanity to just say, well, this is a biological difference and that's it. Of course, we had to make a whole social hierarchy around it. So it was like, how do I view myself compared to you in this? And obviously, men on average are bigger, therefore they're higher in the hierarchy and all these other things. They could think of a whole lot of reasons why they get to be the top of the hierarchy in this system that we made. But it's all absolutely ridiculous. But you do see this with the human need to just make hierarchies of kind of any situation they're in, and it's stupid. It's kind of admirable about how consistent they are within that. Like you are absolutely incessant in your need to make a hierarchy of everything, and I like, even with small things in life, like people will have competitions over the dumbest shit, like who can like recently on streams, like who can eat the most warheads in a certain time frame. Like, why do you need to be the best at this? There's zero need to be the best at this, but for some reason our egos like need to be the top of a hierarchy, so we create all of these. And it's really interesting how all of that works sociologically.
Yeah,
I think oh no, sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, I asked the question because I think that there are several issues there. First, there is this, as you said, this primal need to figure out what we are. We see. I was watching a lecture by Dr. Sapolsky recently, and he was talking about how when he was studying baboons, the first thing they did when a child is born is to see what's between its legs. So it's I think there's a very very primal need to know at first, but then there's also what you said about building hierarchies, but I think also there's our general attitude to create us versus them groups, and this is the first we can convey in as children. When you're children, the first thing you know is that's a boy, that's a girl, and that's the first way you have to feed this need we have as humans to create boxes and created a group in which we belong and put other people who don't belong in there in another group. And so I thought that was one of the reasons as well.
So, as someone who has a big interest in psychology, one of my favorite people to learn about was this psychologist Carl Rogers, and the work that he is doing.
Sorry, I was like, what?
I was like, yeah, no, I was confused.
Okay.
I was like, Carl Rogers, he looked just like Heathen Queen.
Yeah.
But so he studied a lot of, essentially he created the term cognitive dissonance, if you're familiar with it, of like when you have this idea of what the world should look like, or what things should look like, and it's different, so the reality is different. That makes people feel it creates that cognitive dissonance. It creates discomfort that people want to try to alleviate. And so what either happens is they try to either change the circumstances so that their insides meet their outsides, or they try to rationalize why it's okay that it's different. And I think that has to do a lot with one, I think there's a lot of people who are very neurodivergent that haven't been diagnosed or don't realize. Like, I didn't realize I have ADHD until I was 29. And people who are neurodivergent really wrestle with black and white thinking. So there's very clear boundaries, and that control, even though that control, like for a lot of people, it's very limiting. It also creates security. It creates, like even within like a hierarchy, people are on the lower totem pole that like are these like women who support the patriarchy. It's not that they see that they are fighting for them having less rights. It's that they believe that they are being protected because that control gives lets them know exactly what their roles are. And so whenever people, so they try to set these very clear gender roles so that they know exactly where they're supposed to function in society. Like, this is how I'm supposed to behave. This is how other people, like, I now know the expectations. And so whenever you have people who are outside of those roles, it's suddenly, like you could see that, like Jordan Peterson at one point said that if like he doesn't know how to talk to someone if they have, they, them pronouns. And it's like, because you don't know whether you're supposed to respect what they say or not, essentially, because you don't know what gender they are. Like that's what he was ultimately saying.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I mean, that whole thing, you wouldn't be able to talk to really anybody on earth if you take that premise and apply it to anything else. Like, I obviously only understand how my brain works and how I want to interact with society and who I am. I will never understand who Heathen Queen is in her own brain and how she interacts with the world, because I don't work that way. Like, that's just right. I will never understand how any of you work the way that you do. And that's just like, does that mean I can't interact with you just because I don't understand how you can use the pronouns that you use, or don't understand how you can wear the things that you wear or do the things like you can't take that and apply it to other things without having a problem. So I don't know, the guy's just a mess in general, but like the whole
I mean,
argument
yes,
is problematic.
it is, and it's something that, like, I mean, you can see it with, like, that's a big underlying thing for why so many Christians are against gay marriage, is because in Ephesians, it lays out, so the man is the head of the household and the woman is supposed to submit to him. But if there's two women or there's two men, what are your roles? Like, that stepping outside of what has been clear, like the prescribed roles, like, makes them very uncomfortable, because that's like, that's not what they have been told it should look like. But have you seen the anti-woke chocolate that the Daily Wire is selling?
I have not, but I'm scared.
So they're selling anti-woke chocolate, and so they only have 2 bars, and one of them says she, her, and one of them says he, him, and the he, him has nuts, and then the she, her is nutless. And I was like, man, I wish that I had the kind of resources to, like, create, like, a chocolate company right now, because I would literally do this, like, gender chocolate that every piece of, like, basically be like, gender is like a box of chocolates, you'll never know what you're gonna get, and to have it be like this variety pack, where, because the way everybody expresses their gender is different, and that's okay.
But it's funny because, like, that logic doesn't even stand, because if they're going to assert that trans women are men and that trans women aren't women, but if you are a man, then you have nuts, it's like any post-op trans women no longer qualify in that view as men. So where's your logic? You're contradicting yourself in your own snarky chocolate.
Right. And then, like, also people who just think that, like, no matter what, if you're a man and you sleep with a trans woman, that you're gay, because you like, and that person could have all of the surgeries and everything and you would still be gay. And it's like, because, like, people aren't attracted to people's chromosomes. I'm not like, when I see a woman and I find her physically attractive, I'm not like, oh, XX, yeah, that's it right there. Or, like, when I see a man or an MB cutie, I'm not like, oh, that XY right there, look at that.
Yeah, and it's even more stupid when you realize that those far-right people who want to fight wokeism and all that, and they don't believe in gender roles, they go and create their own without realizing it, because when you hear about alpha male and then beta male and then all those different categories, they are all gender roles, and it's it's crazy that they don't even realize it.
Yeah, they got to make hierarchies within their own subset, because not everybody can be the top of the top in their hierarchy. They have to set up their own hierarchy inside their own hierarchy, which is super upsetting that we have the need to do that as humans. But it's also wild to me. But it presents an interesting point, though, too, just more of a social justice concept. With you have different cultures that have their own different gender roles and different genders set up within their culture. And sometimes we see people try to claim one of those identities despite, like, not being in that culture or not being in that particular social setting. Like, for example, in India, you have Hijra, and, like, in native cultures, you have Two-Spirit. And sometimes people will be like, oh, well, I could see myself being that, but not taking into account that, like, this is a societal thing, and you are engaging with a society on the level of gender. So claiming something like Two-Spirit without engaging with society with those cultural handicaps that you often get with some of these marginalized communities, it can end up being problematic. Because even if the idea is the same, like even if a non-binary person who's not from that cultural group has similar an identity, they're still not going to face the same social issues that someone who is a two-spirit within the Native community would face. So that is something that I have seen a little bit, where the gender roles kind of get sticky.
So thank you so much for sharing, Ben. Heathen Queen does need to leave in a few minutes. So I just before she does, I want to thank you for joining us today, and for giving your insights. Just before you leave, if there's anything, you've been dealing with a lot of brain dead trolls on Twitter who
it's not just Twitter. Yeah. So
I know it's TikTok, it's everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, this is just funny to me and also exhausting. And it's like kind of relevant. So for most of you probably know, I'm a weightlifter. I used to do it competitively. I've competed at nationals. I have trained with a 3-time Team USA Olympic weightlifting coach. I have been a fitness professional for like 10 years. I have trained with physical therapists who are also competitive weightlifters. Like, I know what I'm doing. I also, this will be important, graduated top of my class with an economics degree. Okay. So like math, got it. I have been posting some of my lifting videos on Twitter, and I have men argue with me that the weight that I said is on the bar is not on the bar. And they're saying that it's more than I'm saying it is, right? Like, it's not like they say I'm lying, like I'm pretending it's more, like I'm pretending it's more. They're saying, I said it's 235. They said that's 315. Now, first of all, why the hell would I lie if I was lifting 315 and not 235? But the thing is it's not that. They don't think I'm lying. They think I'm dumb. They think I can't count. They think that I don't know what I'm doing in the gym or in the weight room or whatever. And I don't know how to count plates. And I'm just, some sad woman that doesn't know anything. When in reality, like, if they walked into the gym, I would be there training them. But like, the thing is that it's part of, I think it's part of just being conditioned as a man. They have this like pathological need to be right. Even when I'm sitting there telling them, like, I'm like, these are the weights that are on the bar. This is what they add up to. Like, and they're still telling me that, no, I'm wrong. Like, they were like, everybody that has an opinion about it's not an opinion. I was there. I loaded the bar and then I lifted the bar. Like, and women, like, as someone who, like, I'm pretty good at holding my own, like, you start to feel fucking crazy because when someone won't let up and you're like, what? Like, what is this? So anyway, I do think I was listening to someone talk today. Women in this society or assigned female at birth people are conditioned to sort of analyze and overanalyze and consider every possible outcome that could happen in any situation, but especially as it relates to men, so that the man will react in the least offensive way possible. And because we know as women, and I would imagine that for trans women, it's the same, that like when we start to talk to a man, we start at a deficit. They think we're wrong. They don't even know what we're talking about, but like, they're going to think we're wrong. Right. Like, and people will say like, oh no, that's not true. That's not true. But like, it is. Like, I've had men explain my own research that I got paid to do to me. They weren't even in my field. Like, so anyway, on that note, gender roles are the worst and we should get rid of them. Yeah, and thanks for having me. Sorry, I know that was a little bit off topic, but it's just like it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and like if men and women weren't conditioned in these ways, like the world would be a better place.
Well, it's kind of like when you're talking like, and when I say you, I mean like anyone who is essentially assigned female birth is talking about why women don't trust men and feel unsafe around them, and talking about how 80% of women who were murdered by men, and then they'll be like, well, but what is the percentage of men who are killed by men? I'm guessing it's that too, and it's like, so you agree there's a problem with violence and men, and there is a violence like what? What are you talking about? Like, so like, or like with and the way that kind of is like when people were with Black Lives Matter and we're talking about like police brutality and being like, because Black men are 3 times more likely to be killed by a cop in their lifetime, and they're like, but white men get killed at a higher frequency, and it's like, oh, so you do admit this is a problem.
And also, they just don't understand math. Like, again, men and math, apparently. Like, I was always led to believe that they were better at math than women, but let me tell you something. They're not. They can't even do basic arithmetic when I've put it in front of them. So, yeah, I mean, sorry. That's a whole other thing. I hate
I had one, because when I worked in insurance, and I had one account where the note on the account was, customer feels uncomfortable when you say math out loud. Because you would try to explain the bill to them and they would just start screaming at you. And it was like, okay, dude.
Oh, yoke. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for having me. This was I learned from this discussion. I enjoyed it. I do want to plug tomorrow. I'm having Dr. Aaron Adair. He's a physicist over at MIT, and we're doing a live stream at 4 where we're gonna discuss bad physics and his book, which is about extraterrestrial life. If we confirmed extraterrestrial life, what that would mean for religion. And I think it's going to be really interesting. So 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Sorry to plug, but
plug away.
Thank you, Kat. And yeah, thanks for having me. And hopefully we'll do this again sometime. And I'll see everybody later.
See you.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, so, Cindy, was there any other things that you were wanting to make sure that we're talking about today? Or topics?
Yeah. If we come back to this idea that gender roles are inevitable, I don't know how we can fight. So we said that there were several issues that were that could cause a society to have those gender roles, but some of them are pretty hard to fight, because even though we could change the society, how long would it take before this primal urge would go away through evolution, for example? So the question is it possible right now to get rid of all those parameters that come into play and that create those gender roles? Ben, what do you think?
That's a hard question. It would take a long time, and I don't know if humanity, as it exists as this species, I don't know if we'd be capable of doing it. Honestly.
Yeah.
So here's where, because I'm a humanist. I believe in humanity, and I want to have hope, but sometimes it's really hard to keep the nihilism at bay. Mm-hmm. I think that even if we just tried, let's have a little commune where gender doesn't exist and everybody has equality and everything. If it was successful enough, other people who really cling to the power and control that gender conformity creates would attack and kill it. That's why anytime there's any form of like socialist country or communist country or anything where it's like, hey, did you know that we don't have to live the way that we've been living? Capitalist countries will go and sabotage it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not convinced it's the biggest issue, to be honest. Because let's say that in 50 years, every country is like Sweden. And so gender roles are, well, at least the hierarchy part of the gender roles is gone. We don't have any more of those dominant structures built by men. We have equality in pay. We have equality in work. We have all this. We would still have the need to create those us versus them mentality. We would still have this need to understand who we are and how we work. So I think that's the hardest part to get rid of, in my opinion.
I agree. I think it would, because even if we got rid of that particular hierarchy, it would just shift to something else. Like it would shift to people would find some other thing that we're different about, and we'd make that the focus. Because we're gonna find ways to divide us, and I agree with your take on that, Cindy.
I think there's a couple of different ones because I have two reactions. Oh, okay, so this is a good question. So I see several problems with what you all have said about gender roles and how people are. Is there anything we as an audience can do to help the gender role situation or in general LGBTQ plus people? Okay, so I do want to address that question. I was just going to say, like, there's kind of two different ways that my brain goes with that. And I wish that Heathen Queen was still here because part of that was not, like, I didn't even fully do as a mental exercise until she started, like, teaching about it. But so the first one is, I agree, is that it makes me think of that Dr. Seuss story that would play before the Grinch Who Stole Christmas about the Sneetches, that they had the Sneetches and then like there were the stars on the stomach, and the ones that had the stars on the stomach decided that they were better than the ones without the stars on the stomach. And then one of them built a machine so that they could all get stars on their stomach. And so then the ones that had the stars on their stomach went and built a machine to get it removed, and they decided that they were the better ones. So like I think that there's something that is inherently like with that, like that in society. But at the same time, the other part of my brain, and this is the part that Heathen Queen has been talking about, is that it's really hard for us to imagine in a society where people have their fundamental needs met, where everyone that you know and everyone that you meet has their fundamental needs met. And because we can't imagine that, because that is not the reality that we live in. We do not live in a world where everybody has their fundamental needs met. And so a lot of the problems that we see with the competitiveness, with the need to be intellectually superior, is because people don't have their, their physical needs met, their psychological needs met. And all of that creates a lot of pain. And so because people are in pain, they're harming each other. So I think that a lot of that, we would almost have to imagine a world that, like an ideal world where people did have all of their fundamental needs met so that they didn't need to, to have that us versus them mentality, because everybody is just like, everybody already has what they need. So we're all just out for, like a community, because we realize we need each other as part of that. As far as for the question, the Skeptic Haven, asked here, I mean, I feel like that is a difficult discussion or question, because there's not like a one size fit all. But I would love to know what you guys think.
I think the whole gender role situation is like, yeah, it's an important conversation to have. I think if cis people want to help out in any way, we got to focus on bigger things right now. So cis people, go speak at your state legislatures, your city government, all that stuff that you have the ability to go speak at. Speak up against the legislation that's being passed, trying to remove rights from the LGBTQ community. That's kind of the biggest thing right now. Is we need more allies in this fight to get those bills not passed. Keep educating yourselves on these issues. Like, keep asking questions here, asking questions other places as well. Go read up on some sociology of gender if you want to have more of these in-depth discussions about gender roles and why they even exist, so you can have conversations with people. If you see people on Twitter that are LGBTQ and they get dogpiled by gender criticals, like, even if it seems like it's a bunch of trolls, like, go in there, go give them some opposition, because nothing is really worse than feeling like you're alone in this. So even if somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm backing this person up, even if you're not the most effective interlocutor in the world, the effort that you stepped in and said, hey, I'm on your side, that's not you versus the world. Like, any of those little things are going to be helpful. And I think that's kind of the priority right now. But then for gender roles, like, that's more something you can do on an individual basis. Respect people, try to work on your implicit bias, try to think about, if you assume something about a person, try to work on correcting yourself. And like, if you see someone that you believe to be female, but you learn isn't, then respect that, learn how to change your mind, and consciously practice how to interact with people that are different than you. And I think that's, I mean, there are plenty more things, but I want to leave room for Cindy to be able to give her thoughts.
Yeah, my first reaction was deconstruct those gender roles with your kids. That's the first step. But to do that, as you said, Ben, you need to be educated on the matter first. If you don't know how to spot them, then you won't be able to help deconstruct them. So yeah, that's the first step. It's identify them, learn why they exist and how to deconstruct them, and then as soon as possible try to do that with your kids. And that, I think, that will go a long way, because as we said during the show, this starts young and it builds on our very, very core thinking as humans, and so we need to deconstruct it as early as possible.
Yeah. I would definitely agree there. As far as for people who are wanting to be advocates for trans people, I think the way that I like, because as a white person, this is what I try to do for people of color. Is I've and I talked about this at a conference that I spoke at, but I have 3 L's: listen, learn, and lift up. So listen to marginalized people, learn from their experiences, and then lift their voices up. You want to be able to advocate for them without over speaking for them. You want to try to learn from their experiences as much as possible. And then the other thing is that you then have to spend your privilege. And that is where it can, for some advocates, can become very uncomfortable, because I will be on I'll be on Twitter, I'll be on social media, I'll be with like the people in face to face with my life, trying to educate them. But there are some people that, because they see trans people as inherently less human, because they see, if they're a man who sees women as inherently less human, we could have all of the talking points, we could have all of the science, we could have all of the psychology. They aren't going to listen to us because they don't respect us as human beings on the same level. And so when you have people who are wanting to be advocates that are able to then go into those spaces, and you have a friend who makes a homophobic joke because they say, oh, well, that person is such a sissy because they don't look, or they don't act the way a man, for you to not just let that joke slide, but for you to actually be like, what are you trying to imply with that joke? Like, to challenge it. It creates some uncomfortable situations, and there are people who lose friendships because they decide they want to advocate for marginalized people, and the other people in their life don't want to be challenged in that way. And if you continue to do that, they may not like you holding up that mirror, but we need you to do that, because there are times for me, like I know for me right now with like the state of the country, that I get points where my mental health is just tapped out. Like, I can't handle hearing another person tell me that I don't deserve basic human rights, and that the trans people in my life that I love don't deserve these basic human rights. And I just get to that point. And I'm not saying that allies can't set those boundaries too, but it doesn't directly involve you the same way it does us.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wanted to respond to the comment you showed earlier, Courageous. Just understand that good people can hurt other people, because you said, can you put the comment back, please?
Yeah, Wes, can you bring that up?
Yeah. So it's the last part of the message. Sometimes I don't know how, and I know even though I'm not hateful, I may still be doing harmful things. So we have this concept as a society that good people never harm other people, and that's totally wrong. We all harm other people on a different scale, of course, but sometimes we do mistakes, as we all do, and those mistakes can hurt other people. And we need to understand that, because we need to be more accepting to our mistakes and ourselves in ultimately. So be aware that sometimes you will make mistakes, and sometimes you will hurt someone, and that doesn't make you a bad person necessarily. It's mostly the intent behind what you do. If you try to do good and then try to repair your mistake, then there's nothing that says that you cannot be a good person if you hurt someone. And yeah, that's what hurt me in this little sentence that was written, and I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought that back up so that we could talk about it, because the reality is, like, I mean, in kind of an indirect way, I hate when people say that I left Christianity because I got hurt, like because the church hurt me, because I fully expected to get hurt at every point, like obviously not like when you're a child and you have all the innocence in the world, but I thought like humans are imperfect, and so they hurt each other, and a church is a collection of people, so they're gonna hurt people. I fully expected that at every point. And so it's like, people, yeah, like you're gonna do the best that you can. The really, like, but you have to also just be very receptive, and that's the part that people who really if someone comes to you and they say, hey, I know you don't intend for it that way, but when you point out that, oh, this pastor isn't a drag queen, you're subconsciously putting in that person's mind that linking drag queens to being groomers. Like, even if you don't intend to, and if you get super defensive and start blocking queer and trans people because they're pointing out something that is indirectly harmful, then you don't, it's like everybody expects people to make mistakes. It's how you respond to those mistakes that are important. like that's how we grow. It's being receptive, because it's hard when I have to look at like interacting with some, I've had some people of color who will come to me afterwards about an interaction and be like, hey, I really need you to like think about this and reflect on it. And I hate it, but I'm so grateful when they trust me enough to do that, or they care about me enough to do that, so that I have that opportunity to change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything that you have coming up, Dr. Ben? Dr. Student?
I got a lot of stuff this week. It's a busy stream week for me. So tomorrow I'm on Talk Heathen with Katie Montgomery. So everybody stop in and say hi. And then after that, I'm playing D&D on Nat One Heroes on Twitch at, I believe, 7 p.m. Central Time. We're continuing our kind of long-term campaign of Rime of the Frost Maiden. So come hang out there. Thursday, I'm on Transatlantic, I believe with Katie Montgomery again. So I'm doing a lot of shows with Katie this week, I think. And then Friday, I'm on Truth Wanted. And also on Friday, I've got trivia right after Truth Wanted. And then I've got Medical Myths on Saturday. So lots of stuff going on. So you'll find me somewhere.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, everyone, and the audience for your questions and for listening to what we have to say. It's, there isn't like a set answer, because everybody does express gender differently, and their motivations for it is difficult and complicated. But it's important for us to have these discussions and to be able to just continue to deconstruct gender roles and what this means and how it harms people, so that we can change. So, Cindy, is there anything that you have going on, or any points that you kind of want to?
Not at the moment. No.
Okay.
It's pretty quiet.
Yeah, I understand that. I have a lot going on in my life, but it's not on YouTube yet. I'm trying to get all of the stuff for my channel together as soon as possible, though. But yeah, we want to thank everyone. We also just want to give a special thank to our patrons. If you are interested in becoming a patron and wanting to support the work we do, there is a link below. But we want to give a special thanks to Tara, Rion, Deneen, Dan, Michael, Kathy, Cindy, Sunny, Aaron, and Phil. And so, yeah, thank you so much for joining us today and for taking part in this discussion. This is probably something we're going to talk about again and again and again, because, it's something that impacts everybody. And it's important to have. But this has been Women Atheists Unload, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your Saturday.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive, like